Like the first one is that, we're always so quick to just call out what's going out at the moment, what's going on at the moment, right? Like with the whole thing with when Trump had the travel ban, it was a big deal because he was banning people at the airports. But then what was it that caused this? It was Obama's bombing of all of these places, right? That caused this refugee migration, right? And with what's going on with these federal agents, yes, it is, an overreach. I feel, from the federal government, but these are things that they're not new. These are tactics that have been used by our police, and with what the main reason why we were having these protests to begin with is about this police violence. And one of the things that has been highlighted with Portland is that they have been fighting against this sort of like militarization and just like abuse by the authorities in Portland for a really long time. This isn't something new. And so that's why Portland is actually poised to be like a really good place to start these actions, because they've been doing this for so long. That again, this isn't something new. So while yes, it is important to highlight the fact that Trump is, being an authoritarian and all this kind of stuff, it's also important to highlight that these are issues that have been going on, and we can't just care now because Trump is doing it. We have to care also when our elected officials, the people that we put in office, when they fuck up, we have to hold them to account for this too.
Right. And that's kind of underscored by, I think, the mayor of Portland, right, went out amongst the people, and he was essentially getting booed and shouted down because the people knew that, well, you were doing the same stuff just a few weeks ago, Right, exactly.
Right. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about was that I think that what this really highlights is that we keep going on these wars, right? It's a war against drugs and a war against crime and a war against terror. And what we have come to find out is that these wars don't work, right? And all it is that in the background, you have these people, these filthy, rich, disgusting people who are just getting richer, okay, off of the backs of the American people and off of the lives of people all over the world. That's ultimately what all of this comes down to.
Right. Yep. And it's potentially about to get worse with all the support that folks had for COVID about to drop out, right? And the Republicans are talking about like reducing the even unemployment benefits like catastrophically.
Right. Well, Mitch McConnell just came out today saying it's going to be at least 3 or 4 weeks before they have a deal. So that means like a month of not having that extra $600. So what's going to happen? I mean, and we've been talking about this all summer, is that now we're getting to the end of the summer and things are, you think things have been bad, you ain't seen nothing yet, because it's going to get worse. And I'm not reveling in that prospect, but I mean, that's just what's going to happen, because people are going to lose their, you're going to have a lot of homeless people. You're going to have not just out of work, but people who don't have a place to live. What's going to happen? I mean, so I think it's really important at this stage to kind of come up with a movement that kind of can channel people, because basically when you have people like that, I mean, they will go, people will, whoever can. I mean, you could have a dangerous movement from the right as well. So I think it's important to kind of, when people are restless, that's when revolutions happen. That's when change can happen. So, it is in a kind of sick way. It's an opportunity. I mean, that's the way that the conservatives look at it, but it really is an opportunity for change. But we have to try to take charge and try to direct it in a positive direction. So how do we have all these people homeless and in the streets and everything? How do we kind of coordinate that? And I would say we need some kind of like nonviolent rules to play by, and we need some kind of program to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to demand. So I'm always kind of, as a business person, I'm always plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Well, I think Joe's got you covered, right? I mean, Joe's going to build back better. Is that what we're going to do?
Well, that's hope for the best, but I don't think that's too likely. My plan for the worst is that the elections will be postponed or canceled, and that things will just get devolve into more anarchy, and that it's important that we have a plan. And I'm sure other people are talking about the same thing at the same time. But I think, we have to move beyond just talking about stuff to actually doing something.
See, I think that's so unlikely because like most of Trump supporters, right, are the people that are saying, this COVID thing is fake. We should all just, we shouldn't even be wearing masks and this and that. So for Trump to all of a sudden go, COVID's so bad, we're postponing the election. I mean, I think you're gonna have the entire country revolt against that.
Okay, I mean that may not be the rationale, and I don't think at this point it is likely that the elections will be.
But you got to remember, if you already have the military infrastructure in place, it's kind of easy to implement whatever it is that you want, right?
The military are made of human beings. I mean, they are battered down to be robots to some extent, right? But I don't know. The thought.
I don't see a lot of them. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people that are against, like veterans that are against. And remember how I brought up Danny Sergeson's like that letter that About Face put out, calling for people to deny service or deny activation.
Right. And the veterans were some of the major activists at Standing Rock. They were the ones that saying this bullying of these people with these water cannons and rubber bullets won't fly.
The veterans came in towards the end of it. This is something that, the indigenous people there, the Lakota people had been, they called a lot of other indigenous groups to come in, and it was really them leading this whole thing. And yes, the veterans, they did come, but that was after they were called. It was a call that was put out to veterans because of the fact that these federal agents were going to come and take down the encampment. Right. And that is when the veterans were called in to help to mitigate that, but then they ended up just taking it down anyway.
Well, you have to distinguish between veterans, between military and the police. I know sometimes there's an overlap, but Trump does not have support of the military in general, does not have the support of the Pentagon in general. So that's actually in contrast to like some of these South American, are examples of like Brazil or Argentina, where you have, juntas that have basically are military governments. Trump does not have broad support of the top, brass in the military. However, there's the police. Police are generally in these police unions, like in Minneapolis, for example, are generally in support of Trump. And I think DHS is probably generally in support of Trump, because you look at the troops that were sent to Portland, those are border and I forget the name of the department.
Customs and Border Patrol?
Border protection, right? And they're part of DHS. And these people are generally they're like 70, 80% pro-Trump. So they're kind of looking at themselves as being, the enforcers, and they're concerned, with domestic issues more than the military, which has traditionally been, on foreign shores. So I think there is a distinction between those two, and thank God Trump does not have broad support in the military, because then I think it would be all over. But I think there is a distinction there, and I think the military, like you said, Jim, they're made up of all these people are. They're people, they're human beings, they have families, they have issues, and some of them are going to be, fascist or sadistic or sociopaths, but a lot of them are just, people that are doing this for career reasons or whatever. And you have to have that, once the military goes over to the people, that's when the revolution occurs. So that happened in, Russia, for example, or different places where.
Well, and that's what they were trying to do in Venezuela, right? But that's when it didn't work, was because the military didn't go over. They stayed with Maduro. They stayed sided with Maduro, and that's why the coup didn't work, essentially.
Yeah, because so many of the people in the military in Venezuela, they had benefited from the Chavez and Maduro, right? Because they were able to get enough to eat now. They got health care. They got these basic necessities that they didn't have before. So that's why you had this broad support. And what has Trump given people? nothing, right?
But you know,
I mean, nobody has.
But he's the most patriotic, right?
He's the most but it's like we're the richest country in the world.
No one's more patriotic than Trump.
We have trillions of dollars to give to these corporations, right, to bail them out, and then we give a few crumbs to everyone else. But it's like, why? Like in Europe, they're paying everyone's payroll, right? They're nationalizing the payroll. Like, why aren't we doing that there? We can certainly afford it. We can afford health care for everybody.
Because that's not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, Steve.
Well, and that gets back to this whole freedom versus justice dichotomy that I keep pushing, that we're all about freedom, personal freedom. And it's like, well, if you don't get ahead, too bad, but you got a chance, right? If you strike out, well, too bad. But at least America is a great place because you can pursue the American dream. And if you don't make it, that's too bad, but at least you had a chance. In other countries, socialist countries, you don't have a chance to even do that. So, but of course, in those other countries, maybe you have enough to eat and you have retirement and you have healthcare, but I think we're at the point now where the consciousness is changing in this country that we're reaching a tipping point where people are going to say, "Wait a second, I've had it with this rhetoric about freedom and everything because I need some justice too. Like I need some basic rights."
Which just means that the CIA tactics have failed. Right? Because all these coups overseas, they have been, especially in South America, they have been against these leaders who have tried to bring up their country, right? Or at least focus on, restabilizing their countries.
Oh, right.
And that is not what they want us to know that people are able to bring about in the United States, right?
Well, you look at
a no-no.
Look at Iran, 1953, right, with Mossadegh. He nationalized the oil. I mean, he was a very popular, and he was not that radical. I mean, he was fairly conservative. I don't know. He was like middle of the road, but he was for nationalizing the oil industries, which was a no-no. And then in Guatemala, you had Arbenz in Guatemala, overthrown in 1954. He was also like, I want to nationalize I want to have land reform, so people can have land instead of just having it all run by. Even
Gaddafi.
Well, Gaddafi is a special case because
I know, but I mean, the thing is, problem. So what happened? He wanted to bring up Africa. He wanted to make Africa sovereign, essentially.
Right. But if you have somebody in the U.S. saying, like, "Gee, I want the same things. Like, I want to use the wealth that we have for the people." Oh, how radical is that? Saying like, "Gee, we could pay for," because they in 2 seconds they could Congress could give these companies like $4 trillion or whatever it was. I mean, how much would it cost for healthcare for everyone? Even like just basic healthcare, like preventative healthcare and like whatever, just like covering 80% of the cases. I mean, I think it should be everything, but like just some kind of basic healthcare and get rid of these for-profit insurance companies that do nothing. They're just paper pushers. Deciding who gets coverage, who doesn't get coverage. If everyone's covered, you don't need those.
That's why the Repubs and Debs got together and kicked out the League of Women Voters and controlled the debates because they basically don't want people like H. Ross Perot up there showing that. Jimmy Dore did this the other day too, again showing the big pie. This tiny everything but this tiny sliver over here is military. Right? You've got 1% is like food and shelter, and it's like, and everything else is the military. And with H. Ross Perot, some people saw that, and it was like, oh, we're really getting screwed, and obviously they just want it to be, a big commercial or a big joke when they have the actual debate, right?
Well, I think when things get really bad in the fall, it's an opportunity to mobilize people, because if you have 1 million people showing up in D.C., they're going to listen. People are going to, I mean, there might, hopefully, I mean, it could devolve into something worse, but I mean, you could, if you mobilize people around the country and you have these mass movements and people are demanding this, then I think it's going to be, right now, it's kind of like, politicians saying, we'll give people lip service, but we're actually just going to do what we're going to do. And we'll give them a few crumbs, but we're not really going to, we're going to lower the, Social Security age, to 55 or something or whatever. They're not really going to do anything radical. But I think if people are mobilized around the country and doing this and saying this is what we want, and this is where maybe where Movement for a People's Party fits in, because you got to have some kind of a program of this is what our demands are.